My 7-year-old grandson hadn't spoken a single word in 3 years. Not one. But the moment his parents drove away for their anniversary weekend, little Timothy looked me straight in the eye and said, "Grandpa Ben, don't take your medicine tonight. Mommy switched your pills. She wants you to die." The bottle of blood pressure medication trembled in my hand as I stared down at the white tablets that were supposed to keep me alive. My name is Benjamin Sullivan. I'm 58 years old, and I just discovered that my own daughter-in-law was trying to murder me. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. 3 years ago, I lost my wife Dorothy to a car accident. We'd been married 32 years, and losing her felt like having half my soul ripped away. The grief was so overwhelming I could barely function for months. That's when my son Nathan suggested we all move in together, him, his wife Victoria, and their boy Timothy. Made sense at the time. I had this big house in Sacramento. Nathan was struggling with his IT consulting business, and little Timothy needed stability after losing his grandmother. Victoria had always been everything I could want in a daughter-in-law. When Dorothy and I couldn't have any more kids after Nathan, Victoria filled that gap. She called me Dad, remembered my birthday, cooked my favorite pot roast every Sunday. After Dorothy died, Victoria stepped right into that caring role. She'd organize my pills, drive me to doctor appointments, even helped sort through Dorothy's belongings when I couldn't bear to touch them. I trusted her completely. More than that, I loved her like the daughter I never had. The first 2 years after Dorothy's death were rough, but Victoria kept our little family together. She made sure Timothy stayed in his same school, helped Nathan through his own grief, and took care of all the household things Dorothy used to handle. I was grateful beyond words, but something shifted about 8 months ago. Victoria started asking more questions about my finances. How much was my construction company pension worth? What was the house valued at these days? Did I have a will, and what would happen to Timothy if something happened to me? Just want to make sure we're all protected, Dad, she'd say with that sweet smile. You know how unpredictable life can be. I didn't think much of it. Families talk about money, especially after a death puts everything in perspective. I'd built up a decent nest egg over 30 years managing construction crews, had about $380,000 in retirement savings. Plus, the house Dorothy and I bought in 1995 was now worth around $650,000. Not rich by California standards, but comfortable. Then I started noticing changes in Timothy. The kid had always been quiet, but after his grandmother's accident, he'd stopped talking entirely. The child psychologist said it was selective mutism brought on by trauma. Sometimes kids just shut down when they witness something terrible. But there was something else in Timothy's eyes when he looked at his mother. Something that looked like fear. Victoria explained it away easily. He's just processing his grief differently than adults. The doctor says some children blame the surviving parent when they lose a grandparent. It's normal. That made sense to me. Hell, what did I know about child psychology? I'd raised one kid, and that was 30 years ago. Around the same time, I started having more health issues. My blood pressure, which had been controlled for years, began spiking unpredictably. I'd get dizzy spells, heart palpitations, episodes where I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. It's the stress and grief, doctor. Martinez explained during one of my appointments. Very common in widowed men your age. We'll need to adjust your medication. Victoria was incredibly attentive during this period. She'd reorganize my pill dispenser every week, making sure I had the right doses at the right times. She'd remind me to take my evening pills, sometimes even bringing them to me with a glass of water. Can't have you forgetting these, Dad, she'd say. Your health is too important to all of us. I appreciated the care. Made me feel less alone in that big house, but Timothy kept getting more withdrawn. He'd barely eat at dinner, spent most of his time drawing in his room. When I'd try to engage him, ask about school, suggest we throw a baseball in the backyard, he'd just stare at me with those big, worried eyes. Give him time, Victoria would say. The therapist says forcing interaction can make the mutism worse. So I gave him time, 3 years of time. The night Timothy finally spoke, Nathan and Victoria had left for a romantic weekend in Napa Valley. Victoria had been extra attentive before leaving, making sure I had a full week's worth of medications laid out in my pill organizer. It's so important you stick to the schedule, Dad, she'd said, squeezing my shoulder. Your blood pressure's been acting up lately. We can't afford any mistakes. Promise me you'll be responsible about this. I promised. Why wouldn't I? This woman had been taking care of me for 3 years. After they drove away, Timothy and I were alone in the house. I was getting ready for bed, reaching for my evening pills when I heard his small voice behind me. Grandpa Ben. I turned around, and there he was, my grandson, who hadn't spoken in 3 years, looking at me with tears in his eyes. Don't take your medicine tonight. Mommy switched your pills. She wants you to die. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward against the bathroom counter. I looked down at the pills in my hand, the same white tablets I'd been taking every morning and evening for months. They looked exactly like my lisinopril prescription, but Timothy's words echoed in my head. "What do you mean, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "Tell Grandpa what you've seen." Timothy walked closer, his small hands shaking. For a kid who hadn't spoken in 3 years, the words came pouring out like a dam had finally burst. "I've been watching, Grandpa. I see everything, but nobody thinks I understand because I don't talk. Mommy has been switching your pills for a long time. She keeps the real ones hidden in her jewelry box and puts fake ones in your bottle." My legs felt weak. I sat down heavily on the edge of my bed. "How long, Timothy? How long has this been happening? Since Christmas? Maybe longer." She talks on the phone to a man who isn't your real doctor. She calls him Dr. Pierce. He comes to the house sometimes when you're sleeping and she pays him money from your checkbook. The room started spinning. Christmas was 8 months ago. Victoria had been systematically poisoning me for 8 months, and I'd been thanking her for taking such good care of me. "What else have you seen, buddy?" Timothy climbed up on the bed next to me. "She counted your money on the computer. She wrote down big numbers and showed Daddy. She said, when you die, we'll get everything, the house and all your money." Daddy was crying, but Mommy said it was the only way to save our family. Nathan knew. My own son knew his wife was planning to murder me, and he was going along with it. I needed to test Timothy's claims. I took one of the pills from my evening dose and crushed it up with the back of a spoon, then mixed it with some water. I poured the mixture on the African violet Dorothy had loved so much, the one I kept on the windowsill in her memory. Within 20 minutes, the plant's leaves started turning yellow and curling at the edges. Real blood pressure medication wouldn't kill a houseplant. These pills were either placebos or something worse. "Timothy, I need you to show me where Mommy keeps my real medicine." He led me to Nathan and Victoria's bedroom, to Victoria's jewelry box on the dresser. Hidden behind her earrings was a small amber prescription bottle with my name on it. My real lisinopril dated 8 months ago. The realization hit me like a freight train. Victoria hadn't just been planning to kill me, she'd been slowly weaning me off my life-saving medication while making it look like my health was naturally declining. The dizzy spells, the heart palpitations, the episodes where I couldn't breathe, those were all symptoms of uncontrolled blood pressure. She was giving my body time to destabilize so that when I finally had a massive stroke or heart attack, it would look completely natural. "Why didn't you tell anyone before now?" I asked Timothy as we sat together on my bed. His little face crumpled. She said if I ever told anyone about the medicine or the money or anything, she would make sure something bad happened to you anyway, and then it would be my fault. She said mute kids who make up stories get sent away to special places where their families can't visit them. She'd been terrorizing a 5-year-old, now 7-year-old Ninus to silence while she planned my murder. The depth of Victoria's cruelty was staggering, but I needed more than just Timothy's word and a dead plant. If I was going to stop Victoria and protect my grandson, I needed evidence that would hold up in court. The next morning, I called in sick to the part-time consulting work I'd been doing since retirement. Instead, I drove across town to see Harold Cooper, the lawyer who'd handled Dorothy's estate and my business affairs for 20 years. Hal's office was in an old brick building downtown, the kind of place that screamed integrity and experience. When I walked in looking haggard and desperate, his secretary took one look at me and ushered me straight back to his office. "Ben, you look like hell," Hal said, gesturing for me to sit in one of his leather chairs. "What's going on?" I laid it all out for him. Timothy's revelation, the fake pills, Victoria's 8-month plan to murder me for my inheritance. Hal listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "This is serious, Ben. If what Timothy says is true, we're talking about premeditated murder, elder abuse, fraud, and child endangerment, but we need solid evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "The fake pills are a start, but we need more. We need to catch Victoria in the act. Document her communications with this Dr. Pierce. Get her to admit what she's doing. The problem is, anything we gather illegally won't be admissible in court." Hal referred me to a private investigator named Eugene Foster who specialized in family fraud cases. Foster had been a detective for 25 years before going private, and he knew how to gather evidence the right way. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop near my house. Foster was a thin, intense man in his 50s who took detailed notes as I repeated my story. "First thing we need to do is get those fake pills analyzed," Foster said. "I've got contacts at a lab who can tell us exactly what's in them. Second, we need to document everything Victoria's been doing, the forged checks, the meetings with Dr. Pierce, any communications about your supposed declining health. How do we do that legally? We start with what we can observe. You're the homeowner, so you can install security cameras in common areas of your house. We can monitor your phone lines with your permission. and we can run background checks on Dr. Pierce and anyone else involved. Foster's plan would take time, at least 2 months, to build a solid case. The problem was, Victoria and Nathan were coming back from Napa in 2 days, and I had to act normal while collecting evidence that my daughter-in-law was trying to kill me. Can you do it? Foster asked. Can you pretend nothing's changed while we gather what we need? I thought about Timothy, about what Victoria had threatened to do to him if he ever spoke up. I thought about Nathan, weak and manipulated, but still my son. I thought about Dorothy and how she'd want me to protect our grandson. Yeah, I said I can do it. When Victoria and Nathan returned from Napa, I was ready to give the performance of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while secretly documenting my own daughter-in-law's plan to murder me. Foster had worked fast during those 2 days. He'd installed tiny cameras in the kitchen, living room, and hallway, places where Victoria might feel comfortable talking freely. He'd also set up monitoring on the house phone line, completely legal since I was the account holder. Most importantly, he'd gotten the lab results back on those fake pills. They weren't just placebos. They contained a small amount of pseudoephedrine minus a stimulant that would actually raise my blood pressure while making it look like I was taking my prescribed medication. Victoria wasn't just withholding treatment, she was actively making my condition worse. "Welcome home," I said, giving Victoria a hug when they walked through the door. It took every ounce of willpower not to pull away from the woman who'd been slowly killing me for 8 months. "How are you feeling, Dad?" Victoria asked, studying my face with what I now recognized as clinical interest. "Any episodes while we were gone? Chest pain? Dizziness?" "I'm fine," I said. Timothy and I had a quiet weekend. Just watched some old movies and ordered pizza. Victoria glanced at Timothy, who was sitting quietly at the kitchen table with his coloring books. He'd gone back to his silent routine, but now I understood it was protective camouflage. "Did you remember to take your medications?" Victoria pressed. "Every morning and evening, just like you showed me." She smiled, but I caught the flash of disappointment in her eyes. She'd been expecting me to be sicker by now. Over the next few weeks, I established a careful routine. I'd take the fake pills in front of Victoria, then secretly dispose of them later. I'd started taking my real medication again, which I'd moved to a hiding spot in my workshop. My actual health began improving almost immediately. No more dizzy spells, no more heart palpitations. But I had to pretend I was getting worse. It was like directing my own death scene. I'd complain about fatigue, grip my chest occasionally like I was having heart pain, make sure Victoria saw me struggling with simple tasks. The hardest part was watching her excitement grow as she thought her plan was working. Foster's investigation was turning up disturbing details. Dr. Gerald Pierce had indeed lost his medical license 3 years earlier for running a pill mill, but he was still operating under the radar. Foster found records of Victoria meeting with Pierce at a medical office that was supposed to be vacant. He'd been paid $5,000 in cash over 8 months. Money Victoria had been taking from my checking account in small amounts I wouldn't notice. The background check on Pierce also revealed he'd been involved in 2 previous suspicious deaths, elderly patients who died of natural causes while under his unofficial care. Both families had received large insurance payouts. Foster also discovered Victoria had taken out a $400,000 life insurance policy on me 10 months ago, right around the time she started asking questions about my finances. She'd forged my signature on the application and had been paying the premiums out of my own bank account. "She's done this before," Foster told me during one of our secret meetings at a diner across town. "Maybe not murder, but insurance fraud, for sure." I found records of 3 previous policies she took out on elderly relatives. All died within 18 months of the policies being active. The pattern was clear, and it was chilling. Victoria wasn't just desperate for money, she was a predator who specialized in targeting vulnerable older family members. But we needed her to incriminate herself. We needed recordings of her discussing the plan, evidence that showed premeditation and intent. The breakthrough came 6 weeks into the investigation. Victoria got careless during a phone call with Dr. Pierce, and our monitoring equipment caught every word. "He's not declining fast enough." Victoria's voice came through crystal clear on the recording. "It's been 8 months. Shouldn't he be showing more serious symptoms by now?" "These things take time," Pierce replied. "His body is fighting the blood pressure spikes. We might need to increase the pseudoephedrine dosage or add something else to the mix." "Like what?" "A mild blood thinner. Nothing that would show up on a standard autopsy, but it would make any cardiovascular event more likely to be fatal." "Do it?" "Nathan's getting suspicious about why I'm so interested in his father's health. He keeps asking why I'm always checking on Ben, always organizing his medications. We need to move this along before he starts asking the wrong questions. Give me another month. If we push too hard too fast, it won't look natural. 1 month, Pierce. After that, I don't care if it looks suspicious. I need that insurance money." Foster and I listened to that recording 3 times. We had her discussing the murder plot, mentioning the forged insurance policy, and talking about previous attempts on my life. It was everything we needed for a conviction, but Foster wanted more. Juries like to see the crime in action, he explained. If we can catch her actually administering the enhanced dosage Pierce mentioned, if we can get her discussing the insurance payout or what she plans to do with the money, that seals the case. So we waited, and I continued my performance, getting sicker each day while Victoria's excitement grew. The hardest part wasn't the acting, it was watching how it affected Timothy. Even though he knew I was pretending, seeing his grandfather apparently dying was traumatic for a 7-year-old boy. He'd sometimes forget it was an act and get genuinely scared. "It's okay, buddy," I'd whisper to him when Victoria wasn't around. "Grandpa's not really sick. We're just catching the bad guys, remember?" But Timothy was carrying a terrible burden for such a small kid, and I was running out of time before Victoria decided to escalate her plan. The end came 2 months after Timothy first spoke those life-saving words. Victoria had gotten a new supply of enhanced pills from Dr. Pierce, and Foster's equipment caught her mixing them into what she told Nathan was a special heart-healthy smoothie for my breakfast. "This should help Dad's circulation," she said, loud enough for our hidden cameras to record. But Timothy, who'd been watching from the hallway, saw her add white powder that definitely wasn't protein supplement. I knew this was it, the final attempt on my life. I drank the smoothie while Victoria watched, then went to my room to rest. Within 30 minutes, I started my performance. I'd researched the symptoms of the drugs Pierce was using: elevated heart rate, chest pain, difficulty breathing. I called out for help, clutching my chest and gasping for air. Victoria rushed in, but instead of calling 911, she pulled out her phone and started timing my heart attack. She was documenting the time of death for the insurance claim. "Nathan," she called out, "come quick, I think Dad's having another episode." Nathan ran in, took one look at me convulsing on the bed, and reached for his phone to call emergency services. "Wait," Victoria grabbed his arm. "Let's see if it passes. You know how Dad hates going to the hospital. Maybe we should just monitor him for a few minutes?" "Are you insane?" Nathan shouted. "Look at him, he's dying." "Exactly," Victoria said quietly, and for the first time, Nathan heard the coldness in his wife's voice. "Nathan, we've talked about this. The insurance money, the house, everything we need to start over. This is it." I watched through half-closed eyes as the realization dawned on my son's face. He stared at his wife like he was seeing a stranger. "You want him to die," Nathan whispered. "I want us to be free." Victoria snapped. "Free from debt, free from taking care of an old man, free to give Timothy the life he deserves, the life we deserve. You're talking about murder. You're talking about murdering my father. I'm talking about $650,000 in real estate and $400,000 in life insurance. I'm talking about Timothy's college fund and our retirement and not struggling anymore." Nathan backed away from her. How long have you been planning this?" Victoria smiled, a cold expression I'd never seen on her face before, since Christmas, maybe longer. "The pills, the doctor visits, the insurance policy, it's all been leading to this moment." That's when Nathan noticed Timothy standing in the doorway, watching everything with those big, understanding eyes. "Timothy," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "How much have you seen, buddy?" Timothy looked at his father, then at his mother, then at me lying on the bed. For a moment, I thought he might retreat back into silence, but then he spoke, his small voice clear and strong. "I've seen everything, Daddy. Mommy's been trying to kill Grandpa for a long time. She hides his real medicine and gives him fake pills. She talks to a bad doctor who helps her. She pays him money from Grandpa's checkbook." Victoria's face went white. "Timothy, you don't understand what you're saying. I understand, Mommy. You said if Grandpa dies, we get all his money, but Grandpa isn't really dying. He's pretending so the police can catch you." That's when Detective Eugene Foster and his team kicked in the front door. "Police, search warrant." Victoria spun around as officers flooded into the room. "This is a mistake. My father-in-law is having a heart attack. We need an ambulance." I sat up on the bed, no longer gasping, no longer clutching my chest. "Actually, I feel fine." The look of shock and rage on Victoria's face was something I'll never forget. She'd been caught in the act, on camera, with witnesses, discussing her plan to murder me for insurance money. Foster had coordinated everything perfectly. The recordings of Victoria's calls with Dr. Pierce, the evidence of the forged insurance policy, the fake medications, Timothy's testimony, it all came together in that moment. Victoria was arrested for attempted murder, insurance fraud, elder abuse, and child endangerment. Dr. Pierce was picked up at his illegal clinic an hour later. The evidence was overwhelming. Nathan wasn't charged criminally, but he lost custody of Timothy. The court determined he'd known about Victoria's plan but failed to protect either his father or his son. He gets supervised visits twice a month and has to complete counseling before any custody arrangement can be reconsidered. Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Dr. Pierce got 10 years for his role in multiple attempted murders. The forged insurance policy was voided, but I donated that amount to a foundation for elder abuse prevention. Timothy and I moved to Phoenix 6 months later. The dry heat helps my real blood pressure issues, and Timothy loves having his own backyard with a pool. He's been talking nonstop since we left California, like he's making up for 3 years of enforced silence. He's in counseling to deal with the trauma, but kids are remarkably resilient. He's made friends at his new school, joined a little league team, and talks my ear off about everything from dinosaurs to space travel. Nathan calls every Sunday. We're slowly rebuilding our relationship through family therapy sessions over video calls. He's getting help for the depression and manipulation that made him vulnerable to Victoria's influence. It's going to take time, but I believe he can become the father Timothy needs. The house in Sacramento sold for $650,000. That money, plus my pension and savings, is all going into a trust for Timothy's future. He'll never have to worry about people using him for money because he'll have enough of his own. Sometimes Timothy asks me why his mommy tried to hurt me. I tell him some people get confused and think money is more important than love. But we know better, don't we? We do, Grandpa, he always says. Love is the most important thing. That 7-year-old boy saved my life by finding his voice when it mattered most. Now I'm using mine to make sure he grows up surrounded by people who would never hurt him for gain. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Trust is earned through actions, not words. When someone you love starts asking about your money more than your health, pay attention to what they're really counting. The people who truly love you will protect your life, not calculate its worth. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those we trust most, but the greatest salvation comes from the smallest voices.